All right, everybody, we'll go ahead and get started. My name's Keith. I'm going to be the host tonight for Justin and Robert. They're going to be presenting on cutouts, trap outs, and other honeybee colony removals. So I'd like to introduce Robert. He is a team leader for the Mountaineer Beekeepers Association cutout crew, a volunteer team of local beekeepers who do honeybee removals, including cutouts and trap outs, as a free community service in the mid-Ohio Valley and north central regions of West Virginia. Robert worked for many years as a contractor before retiring earlier this year. Congratulations on that. Spends his time building his own bee equipment, promoting pollinators, and chasing wild bee colonies. Active member of both the Mid-Ohio Valley Beekeepers and the Mountaineer Beekeepers Association, Robert lives in Ritchie County, West Virginia with his wife Julie, who helps manage the cutout crew. Also presenting tonight will be Justin King. He is the current president of the Mountaineer Beekeepers Association. He is an active member of the Mountaineer Beekeepers Association cutout crew. He also resides in Ritchie County, West Virginia with his wife Shanda, their 3 children, and a whole bunch of honeybees, some of which he thinks are his. So, thank you guys for joining us tonight. And with no further ado, here is Justin and Robert.
Just speak that earlier, feel free to ask questions in the chat. We're very informal, so with no further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, on the headset here, see if it helps a little bit better with this. As I was mentioning, Bob and I are cutout crew, the Mid-Ohio Mountaineer Beekeepers cutout crew, a volunteer team of local beekeepers, and we do colony removals primarily through the Mid-Ohio Valley and north central regions of the state. As you can see on the screen, the map kind of shows kind of generally where we try to do our cutouts, with about an hour and a half drive of where we're at. We have gone a little bit further. We've recently done cutouts in Marion County area as well as all the way down in Charleston. So that's kind of give you an idea of kind of where we've been. The cutout crew was created in 2019, more out of necessity than anything else. A lot of beekeepers know how to catch swarms, remove swarms. But we haven't really been that involved with swarm removals. Typically, you can count on there being at least 1 or 2 beekeepers in an area that are interested in removing swarms. What we discovered was that there weren't a whole lot of beekeepers in our area that were interested in doing cutouts and trap outs and the harder, more time and labor intensive types of colony removals. The reason being those are both time and labor intensive. They require more specific tools and type of equipment. It definitely requires more of an expertise or experience when it comes to beekeeping compared to catching a swarm, and definitely more complicated, maybe even intimidating at times, especially for newer beekeepers. So we saw this need in our local community for removing colonies, and our local bee club is probably best positioned to help support that. We are by no means professionals. We do this more as a community service, especially for our newer bees. So it's definitely not a business per se. We more of a community service type thing. So with that, we're kind of jump in the presentation. If you look real closely at that picture of Bob and I, you'll see kind of over our heads a colony that we had found in a cutout that we did in Marion County. And the next screen shows you a little more close up of that. That's one of the larger, at least in terms of size of the comb, maybe not the number of bees, but one of the larger colonies that we've found in one of our removals in the last couple of years. The screen here kind of show you walk you through the kind of an outline of what we hope to cover this evening. We'll kind of open up with some of the different types of colony removals, kind of get you down, help you introduce you to some of our terminology. Then kind of walk you through how to plan and conduct a cutout. It's kind of step-by-step process. We'll then walk you through how to conduct and plan a trap out, and that's more of a week-by-week process. Trap outs take a long time. We'll also talk about some other options for removing colonies. Then, if time permits, we'd like to maybe spend a little bit of time at the end with some suggestions or tips on how to deal with property owners, how to set up your own removal team in your local club, as well as maybe share some lessons learned as well. So moving on from there, and I do have one disclaimer before we kind of go any forward. The information that we're going to share in tonight's presentation is strictly how we do it. It's not the only way of doing cutouts and trap outs, and it probably definitely is not the best way of doing cutouts or trap outs. But this is the way we do it. We're constantly learning, we're adjusting our methods and techniques, In fact, one of the things we did this year is we created an internal Facebook page, a private one just for our members, that we post all of our pictures and information from each colony removal, every cutout, every trap out that we do, so we can go back and look at them, see what worked, what didn't work, identify best practices, things we can do differently next time. Particularly, so that if we ever run into another cutout or a trap out that's maybe similar, we can go back and look at the pictures and see what we did. So it's a learning space. Like I said, we're always trying to constantly learn and adjust what we do. As with anything with beekeeping, there's always more than one way to do it. And cutouts and trap outs and colony removals are no different. So as you can see on the screen, next slide, there are basically 3 different types of honeybee colony removals. The picture in the upper left-hand corner is a picture of a swarm. Upper right-hand corner is a picture of a cutout where we're removing both the comb and the bees. And the bottom right, the picture on the bottom is a picture of a trap out. Now, a couple of you are probably looking at that screen and say, Justin, you can't count. That's 4 on your screen. Yes and no. In beekeeping, specifically when it comes to colony removals, there's some standard language, and there's kind of a generally accepted terminology of terms referring to swarms and cutouts and trap outs. But there's not any really generally accepted term for what you do when none of those work. So what our club has come up with is a term we call runouts. So it's kind of a catch-all category for when nothing else works. So as we go through the first 3, then we'll spend a little bit of time on some non-traditional means of maybe removing a honeybee colony as well. So let's first start with swarms. Now, we don't want to put time on removing swarms. We want to put the slide in here more just to compare and contrast against trap outs and cutouts and other types of colony removals. Refresher from your beginner beekeeping 101 you did last year if you're a new beekeeper, or maybe 7 years ago if you're a seasoned beekeeper. Swarming is the honeybee's method of colony reproduction. When it swarms, though, queen and roughly about half the workers leave, and they seek a new home. Once they swarm, the scout bees will kind of canvass the surrounding territory looking for a potential new site, and they'll temporarily gather in a location they find suitable while they send out looking for a place to build a new colony. So as you can see in this picture here, this is a swarm that we caught just over the border in Ohio one day, literally just on a picnic table. The nice thing about swarms, it's going to be fairly easy to remove because the bees are usually exposed out in the open like they are in this picture. And even better, sometimes they may even leave on their own. I know any beekeeper that chases swarms has got a call from somebody. They've gone and thrown a box in the back of the car, driven down the road, and by the time they get there, they said, you just missed it. So, swarms are relatively easy to get. Another thing I think about swarms, the bees are generally calm. My experience has been with swarms is that you can literally scoop them with your hand into your box or your bucket or whatever you're putting them into, or you can easily brush them. They don't have resources that they are defending. They don't have brood. They don't have food stores that they are trying to protect. So they are generally, in terms of most defining characteristic for swarms from a colony removal perspective, however, is that when you do a swarm removal, you're simply removing the bees. There's no comb and no resources that need to be removed. Normally, as is anything in beekeeping, I like to say never say never and never say always. And I have seen swarms in the past that have built comb. They've gone out and their scouts have not found a suitable place, and they have just made their temporary home a little bit more permanent, and have actually started building comb right there in the swarm. So never say never, never say always when talking about honeybees. Moving on to cutouts. So just to understand what we mean when we say the term cutout. So by comparing the swarms, once honeybees have taken up residence inside of a tree, wall, it could be very different. Bees are used to entering the structure from a small hole or opening. Then all the bees and the comb are inside the wall or the eave or any other type of structural cavity. With cutouts, the thing to remember is that the bee colony and the comb are generally not exposed. They're typically inside of a structure. We have seen cutouts that are somewhat exposed, but generally they're inside of a structure or a tree. And again, once established, the colony will begin rapidly compared to the swarm. Once the colony is established and they're in that structure, they'll rapidly begin building comb, actively rearing brood, food. Once they've done that, they really have no reason to abscond or leave on their own. So you're definitely going to deal with where you're going to have to remove them. Hence, that's probably the reason why they're typically more aggressive. You remove them compared to swarms as well. And it's called a cutout because most of the time the covering material over the colony has to be cut away or disassembled so that you can access or remove both the bees and the comb. So when we're removing comb and a cutout, we're talking about not just honeycomb, but brood as well. And then our third type of colony removal is a trap out. Similar to cutout, except for the one key difference is that the comb simply isn't accessible. This could be due for a variety of reasons. It could be due to where the colony is located within the structure, or it could be the type of material covering it. For example, you're dealing with exterior stucco, or brick, or cement walls, or a chimney hive. It's going to be very hard and extremely costly to access that hive and to conduct a cutout. So normal cutout removal is probably not going to work there. Especially true if you don't have interior wall access as well. So kind of if you can't get to a cutout, trap out your next cutout. And what I mean by trap out is if you trap these out by preventing them from being able to re-enter their original colony and by providing the displaced bees with a new home to move into. So as you see in the picture on the right, you see what you see there is a one-way, the shape one-way bee escape constructed out of window screening or hardware cloth with a large end fastened over the primary bee entrance up there against the wall of the building, and just wide enough at the point for maybe one or two bees to pass through. The idea or concept with a trap out is that the returning foragers will fly to the bee's home and not be able to re-enter the colony through it. Eventually, the foraging bees will successfully gain entrance to your adjacent hive. So if you look in this picture, just above it, the cone, you're seeing the very bottom of our hive body that we set up there. As the old colony and the structure weakens, as they lose more and more bees go out and can't come back in, they join our new colony, our new hive that we started on the outside. As the old colony weakens, the new colony in the hive will then strengthen at the expense of that parent colony until it just becomes so big enough that the original colony in the structure will either expand or die out. That's kind of what you're attempting to do. You're trying to get as many of the bees as you can possibly get, and kind of win out that battle. So therefore, what you're doing is removing bees and you're removing honey, but not the comb. The comb still stays in the original structure. Now, some of you may be asking yourself, Justin, how are we going to get the honey if we can't get the comb? And that's one of the cool tricks with the trap out when it's done correctly. So I'll leave you a little bit of suspense on that one, but we'll come back to that a little bit later as we walk you through a trap out. But kind of think about how we're going to get the honey out without getting the comb. Then the next slide I provide for you here is just kind of a side-by-side comparison real quick of cutouts versus trap outs. Cutouts tend to be quicker. They typically take, once you're there to do the work, probably typically done in a day. I'd say on average, Bob, would you say 5 to 8 hours is probably what we typically spend on a cutout?
Yeah.
But they are definitely more labor intensive. You're a busy 5 to 8 hours that entire one day. It may require a second day to come back and do some cleanup, vacuuming some straggler bees, things like that. Trap outs take longer. They are measured in weeks, not hours, but they're a lot less labor intensive in terms of doing work. It's a lot of traveling back and forth, particularly if your location for your trap out's far away. We've been doing a trap out that we've been going on for at least 2 or 3 months. And it's a 75, 80-mile round trip for us each time we go there. So, trap outs can be, while not being labor intensive, can be expensive, particularly when it comes to gas. Both can be dangerous in terms of the aggressive behavior of the bees. Particularly if you're used to dealing with relatively calm bees in your own apiary. So one of my biggest advice is whether you're doing a cutout or a trap out is to wear appropriate safety gear. Like Bob was in that first picture. Let's make sure we're wearing our jackets. That was a pretty mean hive, that one. So generally, and I will say generally, cutouts tend to be more effective than trap outs. Trap outs are kind of your last gasp effort. They are cutouts for the most part. They were pretty successful, particularly if you get the queen. I'd say for cutouts that we have successfully found the queen, our success rate of getting them out and getting a sustainable, useful colony out of it are pretty good. So, yeah, generally cutouts for more than trap outs. Either method that was preferred to any other type of removal or elimination option. So, for example, sometimes owners, if they're dealing with a nuisance hive, will just simply want us to seal them up and close them off. That's a good idea in theory, but there's a lot of bad repercussions from that decision. If bees can't get out the way they normally go into, they're going to try to look for another exit. And typically, they're going to start looking for that exit through the interior of the house. So now you got a much bigger issue than the bees going out from the outside. If you were successfully to trap them, or if they were to call an exterminator to eliminate the bees, you're going to have a mess fairly soon inside your walls or your structure. Those dead bees, that honey, that root's going to sit there and collect, and it's going to attract pests. It's going to attract ants. It's going to attract mice. If there's a lot of wax there, it's going to attract wax moths. Honey will eventually start to ferment, and fermented honey will pop the wax cappings on the cells and start draining down, and gravity will do its thing. And next thing you know, you have a big sticky mess inside your walls and can do some major damage. So while cutouts and trap outs can take time, they are a preferred option to just send the bees up or to some sort of extermination option. So, Keith, I thought maybe we'd stop right here before we get into kind of walk through our step-by-step process of how we as a crew do cutouts and see if there were any initial questions.
There are not.
Thank you, sir. All right. So we're going to kind of walk through how we typically do a cutout step by step. And again, I said this is just how we do them. There are different ways to do them, and definitely probably better ways. Let's kind of walk you through kind of our process of how we plan out the cutout. First thing we do is typically we get a call from someone, maybe another beekeeper or a friend of a friend that says, I have honeybees in my wall. Can someone please come take them out? Well, the first thing we always do is we want to make sure they are in fact honeybees. You don't know how many times we've gone on a call and we thought we were going to remove honeybees and they are yellow jackets, hornets, or they bumblebees, or it was just a single carpenter bee that was seen. So ask questions on the front end. A very simple question to ask is there yellow on your bees that you're seeing? For a non-beekeeper, if they're seeing yellow, it's probably not a honeybee. It's probably a yellow jacket, maybe a wasp. So that's one thing to give you maybe a clue that you maybe actually aren't dealing with. Another good question to ask is how many bees are there? How many are you seeing? As we know as beekeepers, the honeybee colonies are made up of thousands and thousands of honeybees, not just a few hundred, definitely not just a few. So if the property owner is seeing just a few bees, it may be some solitary bees such as carpenter bees or mason bees, or what they could be seeing are scouts, or maybe even robbers robbing out a dead out of a former colony that wasn't that structure. It may not be in there. Those two qualifying questions we always have to ask them from the property owner. We also need to take as much information as possible, either through phone or email or text exchanges about the structure. Where are they seeing the bees coming in and out? Is it on the first story? Is it on the second story? What kind of material, covering material do you have on the outside? Is it a stone house? Is it a wooden house? Is there vinyl siding on it? Kind of what's the status of the structure? Sometimes we're dealing with house structures that are lived in. Sometimes we're dealing with barns or abandoned buildings. We've done several cutouts of buildings that were getting ready to be torn down. And it was just a concerned citizen and asked us to come and remove the honeybees before they tore them down. We love those types of cutouts because we can just do whatever we want as long as we don't have the building fall down on our head. So we don't have to be quite as careful on those. But those are few and far. So try to get as much detail as you can from the property owner. But also ask them about and this is something we've just stumbled on the last couple of cutouts, is ask them about the history of bees in that location. Are these bees that just moved in the last couple of weeks? Have they been seeing bees there for years? We've had one cutout. We've actually gone back and done two different cutouts in the same location. The bees have been there 10, 15 years. They've been there forever. So you might learn a little bit more to help you identify what you're going to do by knowing that little bit of that backstory and that history. So once we've kind of gathered that background information, the next thing we do is we like to go out and inspect the location itself for the removal. This picture here is a picture of Bob and the property owner, Mr. Wilson. This was a house in Ritchie County that they were about to tear down. They were going to build a new house, and they had noticed honeybees for the last year or two in there, and they were concerned. They were concerned about vitality of honeybees and save the bees, and they had asked if we could come out and take a look. This was late February. I think the day we did the cut, it was actually March 1st of this year, so it was a little cold, but still was warm enough to do one. So at this time, they're inspecting. The bees were coming near the edge of the window there. One of the first things you want to look at is look at where you're seeing regular bee activity. You should see, even as long as it's warm enough for the bees to fly, you should see regular activity coming out of where you think the entrance is. There could be more than one entrance, so you also want to keep that in mind as well. We see a whole lot of it. If it's during the middle of summer, you might even start to see a little bit of bearding when it's hot outside the entrance.
And they traveled the length of the window underneath the window.
Yeah, they did. That's right. This is a very odd one. But our biggest tip we can give you, as if you're watching the entrance, is watch for pollen. Assuming there's a natural pollen source out there, if this is an active or recurring, an active colony, you should see pollen coming in on the legs of the bees. That's kind of your telltale sign. If you're seeing bees coming in and out, but you're not seeing pollen out on there, and you should be, that's probably your sign right there that you're either dealing with scouts or robbers, and they're robbing out a dead out hive. So watch for pollen. Make sure you find all the entrances to pollen. Kind of similar to how we like to situate our hives within our apiaries. Feral honeybees, wild honeybees that need to be removed from the structure, the southeast. And typically, I would say that the size of the hole they're coming in is probably about 1.5 inches on average. Some are a little bit smaller, some a little bit bigger. On average, they tend to prefer an entrance that's about 1.5 inches. As you're inspecting the structure, you want to take a look and identify any cavities, potential cavities for the colony location. Help you kind of determine that. You're looking for a cavity in the building that might be approximately about 9 to 12 gallons in volume. I looked at that number. I have no idea what that means. So that's roughly about the size of your torso to kind of give you a comparison for size. We have seen probably cutouts in spaces as small as maybe 4 or 5 gallons. But again, kind of that size of a human torso is what we're looking for. You'll find them in a wide variety of empty spaces and cavities in those structures. Please find them most often in empty floor or wall spaces, in floor joists, in the eaves or the roof of a porch. That's typically where we see them the most. Another good tip, once you know where the entrance is, at least the main bees usually, and I use the term usually here, start building comb within 8 to 10 inches from the hive entrance. But not always. We've had a couple exceptions. I'm going to share one here with you a little bit. But typically, that's where we see it. It's within a foot of the entrance, you'll start seeing them building comb. Another usually, typically the bees, when they come into the entrance, they start moving up. Or if they can't move up, they move back from the entrance. But not always. We've seen some go up, down, sideways, in which direction you could possibly go. So those are kind of some general rules to help you try to nail down where you think where the colony is going to be located. But in the end, it's pretty much just an educated guess. But hopefully those general tips will kind of help you narrow it down a little bit before you start tearing into the structure. One thing you can do to kind of help you use some technology to maybe help minimize the guessing game, but not quite eliminate it. And thermal or infrared imaging can be very useful when doing honeybee removal. Our club uses a flare cam, which is a forward-looking infrared. The model we use is C2, and that's a picture of it up in the left-hand corner. We chose the standalone model because our club bought it for the cutout team for a couple different reasons. We wanted it to have cutouts, but it's also useful for our club as a whole in the wintertime because we can use it for our members to go out and look at the size of their clusters and see where their clusters are located inside their home apiaries. So we wanted something that would be portable to any club member. So we paid a little bit more for a standalone model. you want to get something for yourself, I would probably recommend, if you have a smartphone, get either an iPhone or an Android attachment. The quality is as good, if not better, as it's significantly cheaper. Like I said, we just got the standalone model because we wanted anybody member to be able to take it home to their APR if they're doing a cutout and be able to use it. The picture below there to the right, at the bottom, is a picture of a recent cutout we did, where the bees, if you can kind of see the corner, the upper left-hand corner of the window, the bees are going in that little hole, and kind of what we normally say, within 8 to 10 inches of that hole, kind of moving up, right where the heat signature, a huge heat signature right there, told us, it gives a really good guess of where the bees were. And when we went back and actually did the cutout, we were probably within an inch of getting the entire colony in that heat signature. So in that case, in that particular cutout, the FLIR camera is very, very useful. But this technology does have its limitations. There's certain materials it'll see through as clearly. Sometimes you're just going to get inconsistent readings. The picture in the upper right-hand corner, this was one of our probably more infamous cutouts that we've done. Earlier this year, we had the opportunity to do a cutout of in Tyler County in the courthouse in the old jail, which is the oldest building in Tyler County. It's actually on the National Register of Historic Places. So we were a little nervous doing a cutout in something National Register of Historic Places. But we were trying to keep our damage to a minimum. So Bob's there with the FLIR camera. We've pulled back one of the ceiling, dropped down ceiling tiles, and he's using the infrared camera. And this is roughly about a foot from where we saw the bees coming in. And we thought we should get a really bright heat signature right here. This should be right here above us. This is where they absolutely where they have to be. And the FLIR image was inconclusive. There was a little bit of a heat signature, but not really much. So we thought, we came back the next day or a couple days later, started a cutout. We thought we were going to be dealing with a hole in the ceiling only that big, but we ended up with a hole in the ceiling about this big. And the sad thing is, we still didn't have the bees there yet. The bees were still a little bit further over to the left. What we did there was we kind of broke some of our own cardinal rules. So we ignored some of the major red flags. We did not see pollen coming in on these bees. We just assumed, because we couldn't get an eye level with them, so we just assumed we just weren't seeing it. But in hindsight, this wasn't an active colony. This is just a bunch of robbers. There was a lot of them, but it was a dead colony that was being robbed out. Secondly, the robbers were coming in from a different spot location than where the hive was. Hence why the actual colony when we found it was at least 6 to 8 feet to the left of where we were originally cutting. So, like I said, watch for the red flags. This is just further proof no matter how many cutouts you've done, trying to find a colony in a structure is always going to be a guessing game, even with technology. So just try to do your best. Step 3, you want to identify all your equipment needs. Based on what you've seen on site, your best guess of where the colony is going to be. Start putting together your equipment list. And I'll pause for a couple minutes while we talk on this. I want to leave these slides open. That way, if you want to take a picture or do a screen capture, these are pretty comprehensive lists. I would say this is, for the most part, we use these, or at least take these on pretty much every cutout, unless we know for certain we're not going to need that piece of equipment. So this is a really good standard list to work from, a default list. Then you can kind of tailor it based on the cutout, the travel that you're working on. In terms of protective equipment, you're definitely going to want a veil, jacket, gloves, smoker, fuel to light your smoker, something to light the smoker with. I typically, when I work in the bees in my Honeybee, I prefer to wear nitrile gloves. My wife, when she works in our colonies and home, does not wear gloves. So when we go on cutouts or a trap out, we break out the big leather astronaut beekeeper gloves. It's better to have them and not need it, because you don't know what kind of temperament you're going to be dealing with as you're evicting the bees from their home. Some trap outs and cutouts, the bees are fairly calm. Others, they can be the nastiest bees we've ever dealt with. So just err on the caution and bring the safety equipment just in case you need it. You're also going to want a complete hive. By complete hive, you're going to want a bottom board, a hive body, deep hive body, maybe 2, depending on how big of a colony you think it is, inner cover, outer cover, and you're going to want frames. But you're not going to want frames with foundation. You're going to want empty frames. Because what you're going to do is you're going to end up rubber banding that cutout comb into the frames. That can be expensive, particularly if you're dealing with some newer frames. A couple different options that we have discovered is, as we kind of cycle out some of our older comb and cut out the comb and put it in our solar wax melter, we'll keep that old frame and use that for our cutouts. Or if we have scrap wood, we'll kind of build our own cutout frames as well. So, but you're going to want empty frames, rubber bands, and you're going to need a lot of them. So we typically use, I don't know the exact name of the number is, but they're the postal rubber bands. That's what we have found works best. You're going to want a bee vacuum, and we'll show you a little bit in here in a minute, our tips on how to build your own bee vacuum. Brush as well. Queen cages. Best piece of advice I can give you on this is, particularly if you're working as a team, make sure every member of your team has a queen cage or a roller cage or something in case you find the queen. In terms of being able to transport the hive once you're completed, you want to make sure you have some ratchet straps, duct tape, rubber screening, something so you can secure that hive and keep the bees in there while you're transporting them away once you're done. And then kind of here at the bottom and going on the next page, you have your kind of typical construction type of pieces of equipment. You're going to need knives for cutting out the comb, a hammer, ply bar to kind of get the whole process started. Power tools, our go-to power tools, a sawzall. Once we get the siding off the house, we kind of best to kind of cut through wood to get maybe a drill, staple gun, nails, screws, staples, things like that. Second screen here is probably more dependent on the type of cutout that you may or may not need. As you can see in the picture on this one, this is a cutout that we did in Williamstown in Wood County. Depending on how high the bee is up, you're going to need some ladder or scaffolding, most likely. A workstation or work table to frame the comb as it's cut out. If you're going to be working from the inside, most of our cutouts we tend to work outside into the house, but sometimes you are working from the inside of the house or structure. You're definitely going to want tarps and plastic sheeting so you're not making a huge mess. If you're going to be using power tools, you're going to want extension cords, or if it's going to be somewhere that's not going to have available electricity, you're going to want an alternate power source, whether that's an auto inverter for a vehicle or a generator or something along those lines. If you're going to be dealing somewhere typically where the bees are, it's going to be dark, so you're going to want to have flashlights or some lighting of some sort. Bring 5-gallon buckets. That's another good tip we have is bring multiple 5-gallon buckets, because you're probably going to have a situation where you're going to have scrap pieces of comb as you're doing your cutout. Not everything will go into the hive to go with the bees. So you may have some that's going to be scrap honey, and one that's just going to be scrap wax that you're going to run through your solar melter. So you want to have a couple buckets that you can kind of put that excess stuff into. Water and rags. We always have one bucket at least for cleaning and for washing our hands. When you're doing cutouts and you're cutting out honeycomb, things get really sticky and messy quickly. So it's always good to be able to clean off. Squirt bottles or bee spray. We're just talking about bee repellent. So when we're done at the end and closing up, we increasingly use cameras on our cutouts. It'll be a couple different times unless you have me refer back to cameras. It's always good to have a camera cell phone with you. Depending on how aggressive the bees, maybe have a sting kit or an EpiPen or at least a first aid kit to have that handy as well. But once you've packed all your equipment and it's the day of the cutout, first thing you want to do when you get there is remove the covering materials. Again, this can be typically done from either the inside or outside. You want to remove the material covering where you believe the colony to be, but you want to make sure you remove it in such a way that you can easily put it back together. We've tried to do a couple different things. We've kind of labeled the pieces, just tried to do it by memory. And this is where cameras come in. You can always take pictures of the pieces as well, so you can kind of remember where it goes together at the end. So it's not a huge jigsaw puzzle that you're trying to put back together. You also want to try to use the least intrusive means of access. Cutting through brick, cutting through drywall, stucco can cost a lot from a repair perspective. So you want to try to figure out the path of least resistance to getting to the bees. And then each cutout is different, so expect the unexpected. Each structure is different. So the bees are going to be able to comb in different ways based on that structure. That's going to make it to figure out where and how to get to them. At times, it's going to be a guessing game as to the colony's actual location. But once you've found that opening in the wall, you found the colony, you want to make sure you've cut out a big enough hole that you can expose the entire nest, the entire comb. You don't want to just have a little small access hole. So you want to cut a point through the structure that's at least as big as the colony as you found. And last but not least, a tip on this. This is usually when the bees start getting a little angry. When we start breaking out the power tools, there's just no easy, gentle, or quiet way to do this step in the process. with hammering and cutting and sawing. So this is, if you haven't put on your safety equipment by now, this is the good time to do so. I'm proud of Bob. He's at least wearing a veil, I think, in this one as he's removing the siding. But once you've got the colony exposed, you've got the siding off, you've cut through the wall, and you're down to the comb. First thing we would probably recommend you do is use your bee vacuum to clear the comb. You don't necessarily need to get all of the bees, but our experience has been if you get enough of them off, it's a little bit easier to work and manage the comb. You want to make sure that you're setting your vacuum suction power to just be powerful enough to get the bees off of the comb. You don't want to go full force and pull them in like a hurricane, because what they're going to end up doing is they're going to smash up against the inside of your bee vacuum or your bucket, and it's going to end up killing a lot of bees. And as beekeepers, it's nice that we're removing a colony, particularly if it's a nuisance colony for the property owner, but we're also hoping to get a viable colony out of this cutout or this trap out as well. So you don't want your bee vacuum to end up killing half of your bees. And what's going to be the first, and many times you'll hear me say this evening, watch for the queen. Well, it's not going to be in the world if you suck up the queen with your vacuum. You're not going to know that you have her probably until later. And the cutout seems to go a lot better once you know you have your queen. So we try to be very careful and watch for the queen as your vacuum. And you'll wind up repeating this step multiple times throughout the cutout. You're not going to get all the bees your first chance. There'll be foragers coming back as well. So we try to clear, like, this is Rudy's one of our new beekeepers this year that went on multiple cutouts. He's probably our rookie of the year on the cutout crew. I think he did 5 or 6 cutouts this year. So if Rudy, if you're on here tonight, I know I still owe you a t-shirt for getting your 5 cutouts in this year. So I'll make sure I get you one. But what Rudy here's doing is vacuuming off just enough so we can start getting access to the comb and start cutting it out. This was a cellar cutout in Mountain, West Virginia, which is right on the Ritchie Tyler County line. Actually, repeat this throughout. Inevitably, at some point during the cutout, your bee vacuum is going to get clogged up with bees. They're just going to start gathering towards the entrance there as they come in. When that happens, just turn it off a little bit, let them disperse a little bit within your vacuum, then you can start back up again. Or another trick is to have a second vacuum, which is what we typically do. We try to bring at least 2 each cutout. I'm going to leave this slide up here for a couple minutes. This is kind of Bob's own design. He's come up for our cutout team of how he does our bee vacuums. What we did, the most important thing is the bucket head, which is a 5-gallon, 1.775 horsepower wet dry vac power head and hose. You can buy those at Home Depot or Lowe's or online. They're probably about $24, $25, somewhere around there. You also want to get a couple 5-gallon buckets. And what we do is we drill 4 holes on both sides of the bucket. The holes are about 3/4 inch in diameter. And what that's going to do is allow us to control airflow and control the suction power within the vacuum. So we drill 4 holes on each end, each 3/4 inch in diameter, and then we screen it in on the inside so bees can't get out. And then you can sort of see in the picture here on the left-hand side, we then put duct tape over the holes on the outside of the bucket on one side. That allows us to control the suction power, and then we take tape off or add more tape on. So it's kind of the way we adjust the power of our vacuum. Once we kind of get in that sweet spot of what's working for this cutout, we kind of leave it on there. At the end, though, we'll kind of take that tape off so it's open on both ends so the bees can get ventilation. We'll talk a little bit later about, is it best to, the bees that you have in your bee vacuum, is it best to go ahead and dump them in the hive there on the site or to take them home? There's something, depending on the weather and the conditions, there's pros and cons to both. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I just want to kind of share with you our design. And there's a bunch of other designs out there online. One of the other ones you see that's very popular is that they'll have the vacuum attached to a small nuke box or swarm trap, and they actually have frames inside. So the thinking is, in addition to sucking up the bees are then going to get on the frames. So then, rather than dumping them out of the bucket like we do, you can just pick up the frame and put it right into the hive. We haven't quite got to that level of complexity yet, but something we might want to try. So once you've vacuumed up enough bees to get access to the comb, next is we want to cut the comb out with a knife. You're going to want to remove all of the comb. Honey, pollen, eggs, larvae, even empty comb. You want to get as much as you can get out of there. We typically, and you can kind of see in the picture there, we've started on the right-hand side. So we've got a couple that are already cut there. We typically work either right to left or left to right. I'll tell you a story here in a little bit. I think we may change that up starting for next season based on our last cutout. But typically, you kind of go through one at a time. What you want to do is, however, is avoid splitting the brood if at all possible. You don't want to kind of cut up right in the middle and one chuck's going to go in one frame and the other's going to. You want to try to keep the brood together. You don't want to as much as possible. And again, when you're cutting just like when you run the vacuum, when you are cutting the comb out of the cavity, watch for the queen closely. The queen will run on you. It's inevitable. Whenever we find the queen, she's always on the last piece of comb, it seems like. But she's ran, if we're working right to left like we are on this one, she'll be on that last piece of comb on the left or be up against the wall at the end. She'll simply just runs from you. So constantly be watching for the queen. Next step, once you have the comb cut out, you want to place your comb in empty frames. You'll then rubber band them in place and then place those frames in the hive. One big tip, and this is where a lot of people mess up on cutouts, is you want to watch the direction of the comb. You want to maintain cell orientation. So as you're cutting it out of the structure, just like our bees when they build in our hives, the cells are at an angle, pointing up. So you want to put the cells, when you rubber band them into your frames, the same orientation. Always remember where up is. Otherwise, it's going to throw everything off and everything's going to fall out of the cells. So you want to make sure you're maintaining cell orientation throughout there. And again, watch again for the queen. If you have several people there working on the cut together, what we have found works best is the person cutting the frame will inspect the comb, a quick look for the queen, hand it off to the runner. The runner will then take a quick look at it and walk it over to the framers. Then the framers will then rubber banding it in. Sometimes, if we don't have people, the runner is also the framer. Let's just get a couple set of eyes on again, as much as possible to watch for the queen. As you can see in this picture here, we've kind of built us our framing station on the tailgate of a pickup truck. That's our club vice president, Mike Ryan there. Typically, what you see most people when they first start doing cutouts is they rubber band in vertical. But that's a little bit hard. So if you think about it, if you're holding an empty frame, you got to hold the comb in there, hold it inside the frame, and almost the second person's got to come out and do vertical rubber bands to hold it in. That's cumbersome. It's hard to do, and it often takes multiple people. What we've come up with is kind of a crisscross pattern. So it's kind of hard to see there, but we're making an X shape with our rubber bands rather than going vertical. So we'll give them a nice, good stretch, pull them out, and then pull that rubber band from one corner horizontally to the other, and then crisscross the other way. So we have an X. And what's nice about that is you can then lay that frame down on a flat surface, put the comb down in there, then do the same thing on this side with another X, and one person can easily install the comb into it. It's a lot easier. The comb doesn't fall out on you. We kind of stumbled that by mistake one day, and we've used it ever since. It's a really good suggestion. And I think the next time I have another good picture of us with it actually the frame of the comb in the frame. Another advantage of doing your rubber bands this way is you can preload them. You can go ahead, as you're preparing your equipment, go ahead and put the rubber bands on one side of the frames. So you're pulling out of the box, you already have half your rubber banding already done. You can lay it down, put the comb straight in, and then you only have to rubber band one side. So it saves you some time later down the road. You've heard me say it at least 3 times now throughout this process: watch for the queen, watch for the queen, watch for the queen. Always be looking for the queen until you find her in the cutout. Will the cutout survive without a queen? Yeah, if they got new eggs, they'll do an emergency queen cell and make a new queen. But you're going to lose a lot of time and resources there making a new queen. So if at all possible, try to find take a big sigh of relief when you found the queen in the cutout. So you can see in the pictures there, each step in the process, we are carefully looking for the queen. There in that picture in the upper left-hand corner, you can see again how we frame the comb by placing it in the frames that have already been rubber banded on one side, then rubber banded again. Like I said earlier, each member of our cutout team always has a queen cage or roller cage on them that allows them to we stop it real quickly and make sure we get the queen. and get her safely ready for transportation. Plus, the property owners always love to see the queen. So and that's a picture there of when the property owner's looking at it. They always like to see queen. They also always like to get a nice little piece of honey. So if you have that little scrap piece of honeycomb, we always keep a little extra plastic Tupperware containers that we can give to the property owner. Last but not least, vacuum up any remaining bees you have. Remove any excess wax. What you want to make sure you're not leaving that scent behind for another swarm to move in. We typically use some sort of honeybee repellent. You can use the commercial brands, the Honeybee Gone or Bee Done, which smells a lot like almonds. Bob likes to use liquid smoke, and we'll put in a little spray bottle with some water or maybe some almond extract. That works as well. But what you want to do is just rough that smell of that wax. So another colony doesn't move like straight. Replace your cutting materials back on and do any needed repairs that you agree to with the property owner. You can see that's what Bob's doing in the pictures here. He's vacuuming up any straggler bees. And in the picture on the right, we've sealed up the hole where the bees were originally getting to that structure. That was cut out in Salem, so over in Harrison County. Typically, we like to dump the bees that are in the vacuum on site. There are some advantages of leaving them in your vacuum and dumping them when you get to your new location. That way, they're not flying around there and going right back into the hive. But if it's too hot, if the temperatures are going to be an issue, I would try to get them out of that vacuum sooner rather than later. Last step, secure your hive and the queen ready for transportation. It's kind of hard to see there, but kind of in that middle there, covered with a bunch of bees is our queen in a roller cage. We like to use ratchet straps to hold the hive together during transportation. We'll either use a robbing screen or screening or duct tape, anything that we can do to stop up the entrance so the bees don't get out during transportation. And you want to move your hive at least 2 or 3 miles away from the location of the cutout. It's kind of that, back when you're going to beginner beekeeping, move your hive 2 or 3 feet or move it 3 miles. We have moved them to an apiary that was within that range, and we've had foragers go back to the original cutout site and just sit there on the side of the structure that we just removed them from. So if you want to try to move them as far as you can, at least 2 or 3 miles. Tree cutouts, very similar to regular structural cutouts. One additional difference might be in addition to the chainsaw. This was one that we did earlier this year in Doddridge County. You can see in the lower left-hand corner of the entrance where the bees were coming in. Once you cut through the tree, on the right-hand side of the cone that we saw on the inside of the tree. Otherwise, very similar to a structural one. The only difference is, and it gets really harder if you're dealing with a fallen tree versus one that is still standing. If you're dealing with a tree that has fallen, there's very likely there's been some damage to the colony, to the cluster. They can be very, very messy. At that point, you're doing probably more with a salvage operation than you are with a colony removal. A lot of crushed comb, a lot of dead bees. You're just trying to salvage what you can at that point. Keith, I thought this would be a good point to stop just real quick before we kind of go into trap outs and see if there's any questions.
There isn't.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We kind of move on next to trap out. So kind of work this book. I know we're running a little bit long already, but consider doing a trap out when the comb isn't accessible. So you can't do a cutout. Trap outs are also good options. Are good options if the property owner is not really in a hurry, because trap outs are going to take weeks, not days, to get it done. So if the property owner is in a hurry to get them removed, or if it's a nuisance hive, trap out's probably not your best option. They are a little less successful because you need to have very careful attention to details required to successfully pull off a trap out. And assume with the trap out you're not going to get the entire colony. In fact, that's one of the premises of it, is that you're going to divide and conquer that colony. So you're not going to get the entire colony, most likely. Prep work for a trap out is very similar to a cutout. You're going to go out, get as much information as you can about the location. You're going to go do a site location, see where the bees are coming in, see what you're dealing with, and then go get your equipment. A lot of the same equipment that you would need for a cutout, you're going to need for a trap out. A couple of differences. You're going to want a full hive again, bottom board, hive body, inner cover, outer cover. But in this case, you're also going to want full frames. So you're going to want frames with at least a foundation. Frames with drawn comb are ideal. So it's going to be a normal hive in that case. You can either do a nuke, or you can do an 8 frame or 10 frame, whichever you want to use. The difference is at some point in the process, either initially or after that first visit, you want to come back with at least one frame of open brood, one with eggs. Because you're going to want that as your option to get those bees to make an emergency queen. In addition, and this picture on the left is number 8 hardware cloth. That's what you're going to use to make your trap out cone. You're going to need enough equipment to make a platform to attach your new hive as close as possible to your trap out cone. And you're going to need probably a ton of silicon to close up entrances. So walk you just real quick through 3 or 4 steps of a trap out. This is one that we did, and these are 2 different trap outs that we've done here recently in the last couple of years, within the past year. First step we want to do is close off all the entrances to the colony except for one. In that left-hand picture, each time you see one of those vertical strips of wood, the bees were going into that location and getting in behind that brick. And it was in there behind the brick, and we just could not get to it through a cutout. So we had to go the trap out route. So, and brick on the inside of the house as well. So we went through and did silicon in each of those and left, except for the one on the very far end of the left-hand of the picture, we left that as our open entrance. What you're going to do, and you'll see in the right-hand picture, is install a trap out cone over that remaining entrance. Again, number 8 hardware cloth. It's going to be wider at the base, enough to completely cover the entrance. And you want to make sure it's really sealed good so the bees can't get in from the base. And you want to taper down to a point at the end that's wide enough for maybe 1 or 2 bees to get through. You're then going to set up your platform for the new hive as close as possible to the trap out cone. So in the picture on the right-hand side, what you're seeing is our hive box, and the cone is coming almost literally right up to the landing board there on the bottom. So you want to try to get as close as possible to that. The thinking, the logic there is once you install the cone, as the foragers come back, they can't get back into the cone one way. They can't figure out how to get through that small of an entrance there. So what they do is eventually they start gathering at the base, trying to get in that way. And once, after enough time has passed, maybe 20, 30 minutes, maybe a couple hours, they'll eventually figure it out and start working their way towards your hive. That scent of that open brood of those eggs will attract them in because they're going to want to go there and start nursing that brood and those eggs. So slowly over time, as the foragers return, slowly start moving into your colony. Of course, you're dealing with foragers, you're dealing with bees that probably only have, in the summertime, probably only a couple weeks left in their life anyway. So we got to get this colony going up and running. Otherwise, all of our bees are going to be dead in a couple weeks. Fast forward a couple weeks, come back, maybe check on a weekly basis. Every 2 weeks, come back again, look at the cone here. As you see bees gathering around, make sure they're not getting in there at the base of the trap out cone. Go around making sure they're not having any other entrances. If they get through or they have another entrance, you're back to square one, unfortunately. You don't have to go back and kind of redo everything all over again. Maybe at week 3, take a look inside your hive, see if you've got emergency queen cells. Start counting your days, 60 days from what you think there was there. Hopefully they're in the process of being a new queen for you in your new hive. Meanwhile, the old colony and the structure is still losing bees each day. As more and more bees go out, they can't get back in. So those numbers are slowly dwindling while the bee population in your hive is slowly increasing. So each time you come back each week, you want to check the traffic coming in the trap out cone. Fast forward another couple more weeks, week 4 or 5. Again, come back maybe on a weekly basis to check on the trap out. At this point, you should have hatched queen cells, hopefully, particularly by week 5. Maybe start looking to see if you have eggs in the hive, if your queen has successfully gone on her mating flight and has come back. Again, check out the traffic on the trap and the trap out cone, see what kind of activity you're seeing. Fast forward again to week 6, 7, and 8. Come back on a weekly basis. By the time you get to week 7, week 8, you should really start seeing eggs and brood there in your hive. Continue checking the traffic cone as well. By this point, you probably are looking at the colony, in the old colony in the structure at this point is probably down to its about bare minimums in terms of population. It's going to get to a point that the queen and what's left of the bees are going to abscond. That's what you want to do. You want to run that queen in the old colony. So keep watching your cone, your robbing cone, trap out cone for traffic. If you haven't seen bees leaving it in about 2 weeks, that's your sign that the original old colony has absconded. And at that point, it's now safe to take off your trap cone. Now, when we talked earlier about trap outs, I said that we're going to get the bees, or most of the bees, and we're going to get the honey. And I said, well, how are we going to get the honey without getting the comb? This is how we get the honey. Now that this hive is big enough, we take the trap out cone out, and our new hive is going to go in and rob that hive blind. They're going to rob them of all the honey, they're going to rob them of resources. They're going to clean that hive. So at that point, all that's going to be left, hopefully, is nice, clean comb. Now, we can't get to that, but that's the best we can do with the trap out is to get most of the bees and hopefully most of the honey. So once you see that no activity, you've removed your trap cone, your trap out cone, give your growing colony at least 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks to clean that out. But once they've done that, go ahead, seal up the entrance. Maybe you use bee repellent again, try to prevent another swarm from coming in there. Seal up the entrance, remove all your set materials, secure your hive for transportation. One thing that we recommend on trap outs is maybe you come back on an annual basis and just reinspect to make sure those bees haven't moved back in. Some bees haven't chewed through the caulking and another swarm's moved back into the same spot again. So gotta come back. Our last category, this is the one that we've kind of come up with on our own, are runouts. This is what a kind of catch-all term that we've come up with for when cutout isn't possible because you can't reach the comb and when the trap out doesn't work. At this point, you're getting probably a little desperate of figuring out how to get rid of them. What you want to do at this point is try to figure out a way to either coerce or force those bees to abscond, to leave the structure, particularly if the homeowner wants them gone. One way to do that is with a bait hive, and that's kind of what you see us doing here. This originally started as a swarm, we thought was a swarm, but by the time we got there, they had moved in and started building comb in the structure. But we couldn't get it, we couldn't reach them, so we couldn't do a cutout. So we tried to do a trap out. That didn't work either because there were just too many entrances and exits for the bees. We couldn't block them all off. So then we tried a bait hive. So what we did was we tried to play off of a colony's natural tendency to swarm, to regulate the population. So we placed a bait hive. This one was a little bit closer. Most times when you're doing a bait hive, you want to place it maybe 25 feet away and try to capture it. It's just like trying to, during swarm season, trying to catch a swarm. Not with food or honey, because that can cause robbing. You want to use scents such as beeswax, propolis, queen pheromone, lemongrass. But hopefully they'll throw a swarm, catch. What we ended up doing in this particular one was we decided, actually, it was a relatively new colony. They had just started to build comb, but we just could not get them out of there. So what we decided to do is the exact opposite of what we were trying to do before. We just opened it up as much as we could and make it inhospitable to the bees as a location to live. So we opened them up to the elements, light, wind, rain. As you can see, they're going down that whole side of the house, open up. And once we did that, what was it, maybe 2 or 3 days, they reswarmed and took off. The homeowner didn't want them there, so that was the best thing we could come up with. We didn't get the bees, but we got them. We got them out of there. Yeah, and then we probably put about 2 or 3 bottles of almond that track them coming back. So that's kind of the category of runout. I know we're just about out of time, but I want to kind of close just real quick with a couple of tips and suggestions, particularly some of the best practices when it comes to dealing with property owners. You really want to help that property owner make an informed decision about what's best to do dealing with the bees. You want to help them determine if the bees must be removed. Is there a safety issue? Are they a nuisance hive? Do they need to be removed immediately? Are they a threat to people? You want to help them as best as you can determine where you think the bees are located. Because this property owner has the best method for removal. And make sure the property owner understands what's to be done and what all that entails. What you don't want to do is have a surprise that they think you're coming in doing some surgical precision removal, and next thing you know, you have half the wall down. So you want to make sure and manage the expectations for the property owner. Be very specific in terms of what services you are providing and what you're not providing. For example, if you're only removing the bees in the honeycomb, make sure that's clearly communicated to the property owner. Let the property owner know that other services will be required. You're going to need a contractor, and maybe do any repairs to the structural damage. Terminator is going to be needed. Or you going to handle the repairs or are they going to handle the repairs? We typically do the basic repairs involved with our cutouts and trap outs, but we really don't do a whole lot in terms of I would consider finishing repairs. That typically is not included. But you want to just make sure, again, make sure you're on the same page with the property owner and they understand what you're responsible for and what they are responsible for. If you're charging a fee, we recommend that you kind of come up with a fair and accurate estimate to kind of take into account your distance for travel, how difficult it's going to be to remove that colony. That initial consultation, that initial visit should be free for sure. We as a club don't charge, we do it free as a community service. However, I kind of went out and looked online to see what the average prices are for a cutout or a check out. I went to Angie's List, for example, and the prices range from anywhere from $90 to $500 or more. So kind of dictated by the locality. But if you are going to charge you quote a firm price, that price as much as possible. And again, all this should be discussed and agreed upon with the property owner before any work does on the colony removal. Last but not least, it's something we haven't done yet, but we've been talking about doing. I think we're going to start doing for next season. Is consider using a waiver or release form. That gives you as the beekeeper permission to remove the hive and the property owner to repair any damage. That way, you're both kind of covered from a liability. The other thing, I'll just give you a couple of general tips on how our colony remover, our cutout team has worked, and maybe some ways you may want to try to incorporate that into your local club if you're interested. Like I said, we operate as a volunteer basis. We have a core of about 3 or 4 people that are pretty much on every cutout, and then we have other members of our club who kind of rotate in or out to help. We have a good mix of seasoned beekeepers and newbies. It's definitely something I wouldn't recommend a new beekeeper do on their own. A seasoned beekeeper, maybe, but even then, working by yourself, cutouts and trap outs, you can get overwhelmed very quickly. We like the team approach. That's something we would recommend you do. It's a great learning opportunity for new beekeepers. Good way to learn bee behavior and, no pun intended, outside the box, see how bees behave in their more natural habitat. It's a good way to learn different beekeeping techniques as well. We like to rotate people through and everybody gets a chance to do different types of jobs. We kind of have a station approach. We'll have one pair that's working on moving the covering material and cutting the bees out. And then we'll have another group that's working on framing the cutout, framing the comb and putting it in the hive. Then we have maybe another team that runs the vacuum as is needed. So we try to break up and give everybody different tasks. It's a little bit easier then. So if you just have one little segment you're responsible for. I think somebody like Bob on your team who has contracting experience is a huge plus. I don't know if I was a contractor and wasn't didn't experience with bees, if I would want to do colony removals. And I'm not sure if I was a beekeeper didn't have any contracting experience, I'd want to do one either. You can kind of get yourself into trouble really quick if you start making some major structural damage to it. So we kind of have Bob as our team. We have the best of both worlds of having a beekeeper and a contractor. So I'm not sure if Bob's out there a dime a dozen, but if you can get somebody that at least has some rudimentary contracting experience. Another thing that we've tried this year that worked very well is we have a single point of contact for coordination for our club. So anytime we have calls coming in about a cutout or a swarm or a scheduling, those are all handled by Julie Koch, Bob's wife. Julie, if you're on there, thank you very much for everything that you do. She keeps us on schedule, keeps us working as a fine-tuned machine, and keeps us knowing where we're going. So it's a good practice that we've discovered is kind of have a central point of contact to kind of just run everything. And last but not least is something we just tried just in the last month or so of recommend maybe doing demonstration cutout. What we did, we had a good location that was really nice that people could kind of sit back and just watch if they wanted to and not actively participate, but they could if they wanted to. And that's what that picture here is. We had a cutout. We had, I think, about 10 or 11 members of the club. So about 20% of our club showed up for the cutout. And it was a very good learning opportunity. They could sit back and watch, and then they can get involved as much as they felt comfortable doing so. It's also a good way to some public education. We had people kind of walk by and stop to see what we were doing. Maybe some of them you probably experienced when you've gone and caught a swarm. It's definitely a good opportunity for promotion and public education as well. We're a little just some lessons learned that we've picked up over the last 2 years as part of our cutout team. Colony removals can be challenging, but they're very rewarding. They're very fun. Each one's a little bit different. Each one's a bit of a puzzle or mystery. We kind of like trying to put all the little pieces together and trying to figure them out. You definitely want to be familiarize yourself with the needed tools. Make sure you know how to use it and what you're going to need. Next tip is pack caddy. If you have room in your vehicles to take everything you might possibly need. What you don't do is get an hour and a half away and say, man, I wish we had that piece of equipment. And definitely pack heavy from your safety equipment. You may not need everything you take, but I'd rather have my thick gloves there and not need them than not have them and just get lit up by the bees. You also need to realize that what you end up doing is most likely dictated to you by the property owner and by the beach. You may think this is what I want to do, but if the property owner isn't comfortable with you doing that, or bees aren't where you think they are, you may not be able to do it the way you want to do. So you got to kind of work within the limitations of the property owner and the beach allowing you to do. Pay attention to the time of day and time of year. Cutouts and colony removals that are done early spring, late fall. Temperatures aren't as cold. You want to watch the temperatures. You don't want to be cutting out brood and the air is going to chill them and kill that brood. So you want to, there's certain minimum temperatures. There we go. All right.
Sorry about that.
Watch for pests. That's no problem. Watch for pests and disease. Doing a cutout or a trap out's an excellent opportunity to do a mite wash or to watch for these. The last thing you want to do is, if you don't get the queen, have a bunch of bees go decide I'm going to dump them in one of my smaller houses back home, my home apiary, and they're infested with mites, and you just create a huge mite bomb and you've taken such good care of throughout the year. So it's a good opportunity to watch for pests and disease as well. And always be careful when cutting around electrical lines. Also be careful when using the smoker. One little spark could set a structure on fire. I always like to share this picture here. You don't want to be the cutout team that burns somebody's house down. So last but not least, there's kind of a picture of us. And if you're ever interested in wanting to learn more about cutouts, reach out to us. You can find us on Facebook on Beekeepers. We are more than glad to. Your club is interested, or if you individually are interested in doing cutouts and you have one in your area, we'll be glad to come work with you and kind of show you what we do, show you the ropes, and maybe help you set up your own team as well. So, otherwise, thank you very much, everybody. 11 minutes over, so that's not too bad. But Keith, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So when you guys are doing trap outs and the bees are leaving their hive and eventually going into the hive that you guys set up, does the queen ever leave that hive that you're trying to get and move into the new hive that you set up?
Yeah, we've had that happen occasionally, but not very often. Typically, that we have problems with the queen running off before we get them into the hive. We've had queens. In fact, that picture in the upper right-hand corner, it's Shannon and I trying to get the queen. In that case, that queen literally jumped out of the cavity on us and started crawling on the ground to get away from us. We've had another cutout earlier this year where we ended up finding the queen on the ground maybe 20 feet away from our hive, trying to fly away. Typically, once we get the queen in the hive, they typically stay there. We have had cutouts abscond on us, but typically it's because they don't have a queen. If we are able to successfully get the queen, know we have the queen, and then get that back to our apiary, usually that queen sticks there. Usually that colony usually makes it.
What about on trap outs where you can't get to the queen? Will she ever leave and go through like the cone and then enter the hive that you guys, like the box that you set up?
We've never had that happen, but I've heard of that happening down there. So I would say never say never, never say always. We've tried that a couple times and tried to entice that queen out with that smell of the eggs and get the whole colony. We've never been successful in it, but I have heard others that have.
All right. Thank you.
In fact, my wife had a trap out a couple years ago before we created the cutout team. It was a relatively new swarm that had moved into like a location, and we did a funnel and did a trap out, and we got the whole colony, queen and all. But that was a relatively new colony. They didn't have very much in terms of wax, pull wax and brood and resources. So that may have just been, they were so new that they didn't have a whole lot to stay for. But I'd say the more established is that colony is, the less likely it is that you'd be able to get the queen.
Yeah, that would make sense.